Imagine a remote farm, miles from the nearest town, shrouded in the thick German forest. This is Hinterkaifeck, the setting for one of history's most chilling and perplexing unsolved crimes. It's a story that starts with strange occurrences and ends in a massacre, leaving behind a legacy of fear and 100 years of unanswered questions. What happened on that isolated farmstead in the spring of 1922? Who was responsible for the brutal end of the Gruber family? And how could a killer simply vanish into thin air? Join me as we journey back in time to uncover the dark secrets of the Hinterkaifeck Murders, a case that continues to haunt Germany and mystify investigators to this very day. Hinterkaifeck wasn't just a place. It was a world unto itself. Located about an hour's drive from modern-day Munich, the farm was home to the Gruber family. The patriarch was the 63-year-old Andreas Gruber, a stern and reportedly difficult man. Living with him was his 72-year-old wife, Chilia. Their widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, also lived on the farm with her two children, 7-year-old Chilia and 2-year-old Joseph. Just a day before the tragedy, a new maid, Maria Baumgartner, arrived to begin her work. 6 people living and working together, seemingly safe within the walls of their own home. But they weren't alone. In the days leading up to the horrific event, Andreas Gruber confided in neighbors about a series of unsettling incidents. He spoke of finding a strange newspaper from Munich on his property, one he hadn't purchased. He mentioned discovering a set of footprints in the fresh snow, leading from the dense woods to the farmhouse, but none leading away. The most terrifying report, however, was the sound of footsteps coming from the attic. Andreas searched the entire farm, but he found no one. He also noticed that a set of house keys had gone missing. Despite the growing sense of dread, the family didn't go to the police. Perhaps they thought it was a prank, or maybe, living so far from civilization, they were used to a certain level of self-reliance. This decision would prove to be a fatal mistake. The strange occurrences were not random. They were a prelude to a nightmare. On the evening of March 31, 1922, something terrible happened. One by one, members of the Gruber family were lured into the barn. Investigators believed the killer dispatched Andreas, his wife Chilia, their daughter Victoria, and the young Chilia with a mattock, a type of pickaxe. The brutality was shocking. After slaughtering the 4 in the barn, the killer then went inside the main house. There, he murdered the 2-year-old toddler, Joseph, as he slept in his cot in his mother's bedroom. Finally, the killer entered the new maid's quarters and ended Maria Baumgartner's life. She had been on the farm for only a few hours. For 4 long days, no one knew what had transpired at Hinterkaifeck. The younger Chilia was inexplicably absent from school. The family failed to show up for Sunday church services. The mail carrier noticed that the mail he'd left on Saturday was still untouched on Monday. Finally, on April 4th, concerned neighbors decided to investigate. When they arrived, they were met with an eerie silence. The farm animals were tended to, and smoke was rising from the chimney. It seemed as if someone was home, but after calling out and receiving no answer, they ventured into the barn. What they discovered was a scene of pure horror. 4 bodies, partially covered with hay. The search party then entered the house, where they found the remaining 2 victims in their beds. The entire family, and their new maid, had been wiped out. The crime scene itself presented an even more disturbing puzzle. The police were called in from Munich, but the scene had already been contaminated by the well-meaning neighbors. Despite the challenges, a few bizarre clues emerged. The bodies in the barn were stacked on top of one another. The young Chilia had clumps of her own hair clutched in her hands, suggesting she had torn it out in terror in her final moments. But the strangest part, the killer hadn't just murdered the family and fled. Evidence showed that someone had remained at the farm for several days after the killings. They had fed the cattle, eaten food from the kitchen, and even stoked the fire to keep the house warm. The farm dog was found tied up in the barn unharmed. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. A significant amount of money was found untouched in the house. This was something far more personal and sinister. The killer had not only taken 6 lives, but had also lived among his victims, maintaining a semblance of normalcy on a farm that had become a tomb. This unnerving detail transforms the case from a simple murder to a psychological horror story. Who would do such a thing? And why would they stay? The investigation began immediately, but it was plagued with difficulties from the start. Over the next several years, more than 100 suspects were questioned, but no charges were ever officially brought against anyone. The theories were numerous and varied. Some investigators believed the motive was robbery, despite the cash left behind. Perhaps the killer was scared off before they could find it. Others suspected a crime of passion. Victoria Gabriel was rumored to have had several secret lovers in the nearby village. One popular suspect was Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a neighbor with whom Victoria had a complicated and tumultuous relationship. He was widely believed to be the father of her son, Joseph, though he denied it. Schlittenbauer was part of the initial search party that found the bodies, and his behavior at the scene was considered strange by some. He seemed to know his way around the farm too well, and didn't appear as shocked as the others. However, despite intense suspicion, there was never enough evidence to convict him. He maintained his innocence until his death decades later. Another theory pointed towards Victoria's deceased husband, Carl Gabriel. He was reported killed in action during World War I, but his body was never recovered. This led to speculation that he might have survived, returned to find his wife with a new child, and committed the murders in a jealous rage. There were even alleged sightings of a man matching his description by Russian prisoners of war who claimed to have known him. But this too remains pure speculation. As the years turned into decades, the mystery of Hinterkaifeck only deepened. The farm itself was demolished in 1923, just a year after the murders, as if to erase the terrible stain it left on the landscape. All that remains today is a small memorial. The case has been revisited countless times by investigators, authors, and amateur sleuths. In 2007, a group of students at a German police academy conducted a modern cold case review. Using contemporary investigative techniques, they analyzed the old evidence. While their full findings were not released to the public, out of respect for the living relatives of the suspects, they did conclude that they had identified a prime suspect. However, they also stated that due to the passage of time and the lack of conclusive evidence, it would be impossible to ever prove their guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The name of this suspect has never been revealed, and so, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain officially unsolved. The files are closed, but the case is far from forgotten. It endures as Germany's most infamous cold case, a chilling ghost story rooted in a horrifying reality. It's a stark reminder that sometimes, the greatest monsters are not figures from folklore, but real people who walk among us, capable of unimaginable acts. What do you think happened at that lonely farmhouse? Was it a neighbor with a grudge? A ghost from the past? Or a complete stranger who stumbled upon the farm and brought hell with them? The truth, it seems, was buried with the Gruber family over a century ago. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into one of history's most unsettling true crime mysteries. The story of Hinterkaifeck is a chilling one, and it is cases like these that remind us of the dark puzzles that can lie just beneath the surface of an ordinary life. If you found this investigation as fascinating as I did, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more explorations into the unknown. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an update. I'd love to hear your theories on the Hinterkaifeck murders in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.